Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion, chapter 11, continued, looking now at sections 8 through 12. Calvin is here continuing to refute and expose the errors of idol worship. And one of the first ways in which he does that is just to examine how most idols come about. If you look at families, groups, nations, most of the idols or images that they venerate or worship are descended from some form of ancestor worship. That is, somebody had a really great father or mother or grandfather or grandmother, and in their death, you have the natural human desire, which, if it's hedged in, can be perfectly appropriate to honor or in some way memorialize the dead. And then there's the superstitious carryover that we need to preserve their memory. And what happens? All of a sudden, there's a little statue or figurine of mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, and now they're a god. We show deference to, venerate, honor, worship 2 or 3 times a year. Calvin here gives at least a part or a substance of his famous quote that the mind of man is a perpetual forge of idols, that it is part and parcel of the human condition to, even if we have some notion of what the true and living God is like, to desire to visually depict it because we think that's going to help us. He gives Noah as a test case that the mind of man is a perpetual forge of idols, and that in Noah's own lifetime, post-deluge, so after the flood had occurred, they're back on the earth repopulating it, his own grandchildren are given into the worship of false gods again. Joshua 24 records this, that Terah, even before the birth of Abraham, were worshipers of false gods. This is what man desires to do, to create an image for himself. And the thought process is not altogether illogical. It's just unbiblical. We imagine that if we can visually depict this god or gods, if they're polytheistic, that we will de facto have a better, clearer, surer, more appropriate knowledge of this invisible God. But what is the reality? Not only does that not happen, but it always serves to introduce error, lies, and corruption, because the Bible is clear. As logical as we might think, a visible signpost or image is going to help us in worship and praying, it is absolutely not. It is always going to detract, because the Bible is clear. The majesty, glory, holiness of God cannot be contained or represented in an image, not even close. It always tarnishes the glory of the true God. It always takes away. It always introduces error. And then he gets into number 10, the practical argument that he draws from Augustine. We're visually inclined creatures, and we always like to connect dots inappropriately and unhelpfully if we have an image before us. And Augustine's basic argument is what? If I'm praying, if I'm worshiping, and I have an image in view, even if that image is just meant to aid or help me, I will make a connection point to say that image is what is hearing me. That image, at least in part, is what is going to answer me or help in the performance of that answer or some way assist. If I don't pray before that, my prayer's less close, less near, less heard, less likely to be performed. Section 11, he gets into what is essentially a Greek word gymnastic argument in favor of idols, which, it's crazy what people believe, but basically there were Greeks who said, no, we're not actually worshiping idols. That is the Greek word for worship. We are merely serving or attending these idols. Of course, it's absolute nonsense. In a similar way, the megachurch American model, we do similar things, do we not? It only looks like they're being entertained at a rock concert. But no. That's actually worship. Really? Because it looks like you're being entertained at a rock concert, and it's the same 7 words 11 times over, and I'm not really getting even the gist of how this is worshipful. But nonetheless, we do those sort of word gymnastics as well. The final section there, before breaking on this video, is basically to say, look, the Reformed camp is not an absolutist against images. They just need to be used in a clean, pure, and lawful way. And obviously his argument would be they're often not. They're used to deface or tarnish the true glory of the living God. But he says there are appropriate venues for images, and we need to look at them in terms of their natural content. That is, somebody can make an image that is perceived with the eye, and that's really all we can appropriately make a true and accurate image of. What me and other human beings can behold with our eyes. He says these appropriate images, that is, what is pure and lawful, generally always boil down into two categories: that of historical recreation, or pictorially, what I can see and then redepict. Fruit, a landscape, an animal, another person, whatever that might be. Well, that's Calvin in his Institutes, chapter 11, sections 8 through 12. I hope that was a benefit to you.